I'm going to attempt to try and talk about my past life in Mintaka again, but it's going to be a bit different this time because I'm going to be talking about some memories that weren't there previously, because it didn't come through at the time. And I even explained in my previous video how this information came from an energy attachment, so how I didn't get it in order, also how I got some stuff that I believe not to be true. So I'm only going to talk about the stuff that I know for a fact is true, or at least I believe to be true, when it comes to the memories that I have. And another thing to explain about it is there's different dimensions where you can have different incarnations, and this one is the physical plane. But there's also other dimensions where you can be other types of energy forms. So some incarnations you can be like light beings, or like in my previous life I had something called a etherical body. It's like you're mostly in spirit form, but you still have something you take on that's like a body. And Mintaka was in a spirit type dimension. So in these other dimensions, you know, there's like these worlds on other planets and stars that wouldn't be there if we looked in our dimension. And also like frequency as well. When you're an extraterrestrial, you vibrate at a higher frequency. So us humans wouldn't be able to see it with our own eyes if we went to these dimensions where there are extraterrestrials that are in energy forms. Like we can only see a certain amount of light. But like in these other dimensions, the rule sets are not as strict as here because, you know, you're not in a physical body, so you don't have as much limitations. So how I came to Mintaka was, there is what I think might have been a memory of me flying through space looking for like a new planet to incarnate on, and I was energy, and I came across these 3 stars, and they wanted me to incarnate on their stars, so they were trying to call me over. Stars kind of make this kind of, I can't even explain the sound. There's like some things I'll be talking about where I can't even explain it or put it into words, but they kind of make like this weird kind of frequency sound, which I don't even know how to explain how it sounds, but they were trying to call me over, but like in spirit, then suddenly these sounds translated into words, and they were saying we are home neighbouring star worlds, and we love each other very much. And one was arguing, no, I love you very much. And they go, well, let's all just agree that we all love each other. Hurry up and choose. Which one do you want to incarnate on? And one said they had this on their star, and the other said they had this. And then Mintaka said, well, here we have water and we have fun here, and there's love. So I went to that star, and I don't know what happened from there. I don't know my family dynamic in that life. Like, I don't remember, like, I wasn't given information on an early childhood or like who my parents were. I think I had a mum that died, I'm not sure. And it's like, I know when I said in my other video my aunt and dad, I don't know for certain if that was my aunt or dad. I just know that I lived with a man and a woman that I wasn't, like I was biologically related to, but not like they weren't my parents, except my dad. But that depends if he was biologically my dad, which even then I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to start off talking about the war and then how certain things that I saw from the past like relate to like some things that I saw during the war. So like the bridge, and like how that relates to things that I saw in the past, instead of just randomly talking about some memories of like these places, because I feel like it'd be the easiest way to explain it. So the only thing I remember like from the war is we were standing in a straight line on some rocks, and these like dark UFOs were firing something like missiles or something at us, and we all jumped in the water. And this is quite a shallow area of water, and there was like rocks underneath, and so many other like Mintakans were like hitting their heads on the rocks and were being knocked out. Some were killed. I almost did, but I'm just gonna call them my dad and my aunt. They caught me in time before I actually injured myself, and they're like following me, and there was like a rock ledge that kind of stuck out that we were able to hide underneath, and it's kind of like it could be worked like a tunnel. We had like an area where we could hide underneath it, and as we were like following each other and hiding underneath, I saw that there was a Mintakan woman that had injured herself, but she was still alive, that had been knocked out. And I said that we need to help her, and my dad and aunt are like, no, we need to get to safety, don't worry, they're sorting her out. So we continued hiding underneath these rocks as quietly as we could, and then for a moment we believed it to be clear, and then the Mintaka Queen, she appeared, but before she did, someone said that I should lead, and then that's when the Queen came out and said no, she's too young. And because of that, it makes me think that I might have been related to royalty, but I'm not sure on that one, because why else would she have said that if I wasn't like related in some way? Also, like, before the war, I did like really important job as well for the collective. So I was like the record keeper, and the record keeper is pretty much the Akasha records person, kind of like what Raziel, I think it's called Raziel. There's an angel that does like the Akasha records, so pretty much the same thing, except I'd go around places sometimes like with the Queen, where she'd take me where I'd need to be, and I'd gather like information. And like how I would do this is, like, there was one memory where I was on like an area where there's like a beach, and like what I'd have to do is, when I kind of connected my energy to everyone there, I could see everyone's energy field, and like not all of your thoughts and your feelings and memories are all stored in your brain. Some of it is stored in your energy field, and this is why people can gain access to past lives, because it wouldn't be all in your brain, because then it wouldn't be possible to access past lives, because obviously that brain in that life is decayed and gone, but your energy field stays with you, and that stores information. So everyone would look like a cluster of grey lines, and you could see pulses of electricity just going through their energy field, and it'd make this weird electrical static sound, and these grey lines would like attach to my energy field, and I'd get all this information. Like, I knew everything about everyone there, so it was quite personal, but no one minded that I knew all that about them, because they knew that I had an important job to like store this information. I don't know like where I sent this information, what I did with it, and then what happened to it like after I've incarnated here. Maybe it went to the Akasha records, I don't know, but that's all I know about it. And because everyone looked like a cluster of grey lines, like if anyone has seen what the energy field looks like on like pictures and things, you're like caged in. So the only thing I could see was like movement of people wandering around on the beach, but I couldn't see any of their facial features or anything, because the energy field just covered up their appearance completely. There was another memory of another place that I went with like the Queen, and there was this place called Aya. And the strange thing is, I was called Aya in that life, so I was named after the Crystal Mountains. So there's these famous Crystal Mountains in this place, and I remember going there one time, and I was saying to the Queen, oh, well, this person's going to get this scepter when they're like 16 or something, and so on, and like all this information about other people. And I remember her going, oh, you're here to store the memories, not announce them to the world. When I also spoke on Chad's channel, I kept getting questions like about our society, about capitalism did not exist in that world. Like, we lived kind of like how our ancestors lived. We kind of just, you know, gathered food, and when we did like food trading, and we traded for things. So we just lived like naturally. There was like no cars, money wasn't a thing that existed. We literally just swam all day in the sea, chilled out, talked, gathered food, trade. Nothing like what happens here. And because of that, there was like no corruption. We did have like advanced technology, I think, but I'm not really sure if like all that came from us. There also were like these portals that were like in different areas and in the sea, like these archways that would lead to different places, but no one knew where these archways came from. We also lived in like these giant shell houses, and we used kind of like, we did something like with the sand, which like created something like concrete, where we were able to extend the size of the shell house to make it bigger. But I mean, these shell houses were huge. Like, shells on this planet don't get that big. Why, these shells were humongous enough that we could actually live inside them, and all we had to do is like extend the size of like the shell house, and build stairs and things like that. In that life, I remember like having a conversation about like the shell houses, and someone was telling me that everyone believed that a long time ago, before there was any life on that star, that there were giant sea creatures that lived there before we did. And obviously when they died, they left their shells behind that became fossilized enough, but we were still able to like use them. So we lived in these shell houses because we couldn't breathe underwater forever. Like, I think we either held our breath for a really long time, but we were limited to how long. I've heard some people say as long as 3 days, but I'm not sure how true that is. I think that we were able to breathe underwater, but only for a certain period of time, because I've had dreams before of like breathing underwater and it felt so real. And I could feel like the way that it felt like the bubbles coming out of my nose and like throat as I was breathing. I don't know how to like explain that. And because I've had dreams like that, I think that maybe we were able to breathe, but only for so long. And it was much safer for us to sleep on land than to sleep under the water. So that's why we lived on land. And we had something that was like legs that were able to turn into a fishtail when we were in the water and then come apart, just kind of like an H2O, just had water, I think. But I'm not sure how that worked, because I got the impression I had a fishtail, but then I also have memories of like walking on land and having like legs. And the type of tail we had acted like, they had like muscle in them, so we were able to like in our fins, we were able to stand up on them just like feet and like move around. We were also like a type of mermaid, but we didn't look like human descriptions of like mermaids. We weren't beautiful looking to human standards. We had more like fish facial features. I do remember other Mintakans having different features where I'm convinced that they weren't from our star planet. They were like from other planets or stars, and they were like living on our planet, or I mean like, well, living on a star. Because like when I was talking about the war and we were all standing on these rocks before like these missiles were being fired at us, there was like, I remember like a few that looked like these bears with like 3 eyes in like their appearance, but most of us had like fin like ears, and we had like skin were either like blue in colour, and I think I was like a light blue, very pale light blue colour. But then I remembered like who I think was my dad in that life being like green in colour. And we also had either spots or like cow patches or both. But I don't remember our appearance that well, so I couldn't really say what we looked like exactly. I needed to see first if it was clear for them to be able to move like into the tunnel without being seen by the reptilians. So the reptilians were the main ones that were attacking us. I've also seen on Reddit people say the Akanaki and like many other alien races that were involved. I do know that there was 2 Pleiadians that were involved and were involved from the downfall of like our star, but I'll come back to those later. But the reptilians were like the main ones that were attacking us. I was the only one that could kind of like astral project, but only for a very, very short distance from my body, not very far at all, and I couldn't really go far with it. I seem to be like really proud that I was able to like do this. I think that's like an ego thing. But I was excited to go up and try it, and even though I was scared, I still was like excited to try this out and see whether it was like safe or not. So they helped me climb up onto a slight ledge, because it was kind of like there's like a hilly part thing, and they kind of had to like help me stand on a rock so I could be nearer to the bridge, so I could astral project far enough to see what was on the other side. So from there I astral projected, and I saw like this bridge that had been broken in half and I could see further out, and it was like all clear. And this white bridge had like a really important meaning to it, and I don't know what the meaning for this white bridge is, because before this war I had been there before, like many times, when my family had like travelled there, I think for like a holiday or for important events, and I always remember this white bridge at certain times of the year during like our version of like a holiday. We would like decorate the bridge all in white flowers, and I remember many happy memories of like going to this white bridge and like speaking to people on it, and to see it broken in half and destroyed was just really sad. As soon as like I could see it was all clear, I came down, and we all one by one went underneath this bridge and like through into the tunnel to where it was safe. And we were there for a while, and there was just so many bombs going off, and the noise was horrific. It's like another thing I didn't mention is like the water there on Mintaka it glowed. So if you've ever seen the movie Avatar and how the water glows, it glowed, so it provided us with enough light that the tunnel wasn't completely pitch black. And it didn't matter, like, what we did with the noise. It's like, sometimes we would be under the water to try and dampen the sound of, like, the bombs, but it would, no matter how hard we tried, the noise was just so loud. And the trouble is, when we went under the water, the vibration of, like, the bombs going off would still hurt our ears, regardless. So, and I just remember, like, crying, saying how tired I was, that I wanted to sleep. I was so fed up with, like, the noise. And we were just all huddled together. Then eventually, these, like, in this tunnel before, like, any kind of war, there used to be, like, these 3 portals, and they were, like, they were very clear, and you could see through them, and you could see, like, trees and, like, fields and meadows and stuff where it would lead you to, like, these certain places. Well, these portals appeared, but they had been corrupted, and they were black, and you couldn't see through them. And one by one, we were, like, getting sucked into them, and we were screaming for each other. And eventually I got sucked in, and we were, like, I found myself on my own in a dark room, and there was, like, very, very little light. There was only some light coming through this portal. So if you've ever played the game Spyro the Dragon, I don't know if you've seen, like, the portal's black and it has kind of, like, swirly bits in it. It looked very much like that, and there was some light, so I could see a little bit, but it was still incredibly dark, and I just remember feeling the walls and feeling around. There was also, like, a wooden table in the middle of the room, kind of like maybe like a coffee table or something, or, like, you know, those small wooden tables, like, for kids. So I was walking around this room, and because there's very little light, I knocked some stuff over that was on the floor, and it was, like, dominoes and, like, all these different kind of, like, kid toys, and I felt bad that I'd knocked this stuff over, and I thought, oh my goodness, I better pick it up, this belongs to someone, because I was too kind for my own good and naive, and so I thought, oh god, this is going to take forever. So I just, one at a time, was, like, putting all these dominoes back in place, and, like, lining the toys back up in these straight lines, because they were, like, all in a row on one side, so one row would go that way, then there'd be another row, just like, you know, on paper there's lines that go, so that's the only way I can describe it. So I was picking up these toys, putting them back, and then eventually, when I lined them all up, they kind of made this weird flickering noise, and they spun one at a time around in a circle, once clockwise, and all in a row until it all went down to the bottom. Now, I had no clue that I had signed a soul contract against my will, not knowing I was tricked into signing it. I didn't know what that was about at that moment in time. So I wandered around the room further. Didn't want to get too close to the portal because there's something really scary looking about that portal. There also was a very negative feeling in that room, like it did not feel right. There also was like these boxes on the floor, so I felt around trying to see if I could find anything, and I found a torchlight. And just like, you know, the toys, this torchlight confused me because the toys that I picked up didn't look like anything I'd ever seen. Because they were very human. And the torch itself, I'd never seen a torchlight in my life, but I figured out if I pushed this button, it would create light. So I used that to my advantage, and I saw that there was like this embroidered square keyhole. I think it was like a golden kind of colour made of metal, like on this wall, and it was quite high up. And I thought maybe if I reached that or pull on it or something, there might be a way out. So I pushed the wooden table so I could reach this keyhole, and I stood on it. I put the torchlight on the floor so I'd have enough light to see what I was doing, and I started tugging at the corner of like the keyhole on the wall, thinking maybe I could rip it off the wall and it would leave out like a way for me to escape. But then another part of me thought, well, what would happen if I pulled this off the wall? Am I going to get sucked into another dimension? Where's it going to take me? And that worried me. So I just remember, like, for ages, like, looking at it, thinking about what to do. And then I heard a voice on the other side of the wall. There was, like, two voices. One right next to the wall I was standing, and then one to the wall on the left side. But I could mainly just hear, like, the girl speak to me on the other side of the wall, and she was telling me how this was, like, a soul trap room. And And she said, "You haven't touched anything in the room, have you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, that was the soul contract that ties you to the physical material world." And I said, "Well, that's not fair because I didn't know I was signing that." And she was going on how the reptilians don't care and I need to get out of the room because they're coming. And behind me, all of a sudden, this metal door appeared out of nowhere. It had a rectangle glass slit, and I could see like a dark shadow of like a reptilian being that was about to open the door, and I could just hear the keys rustling as it was about to come through. So I had no choice but to run through this portal that terrified me, and it felt scary running through it. And I fell from a great height, which, like, for a human, I'm sure you'd break a bone if you like fell from that height. It might even kill you, but it didn't like hurt that bad, and I didn't injure myself. But that's only because I didn't have a physical body. And I landed on like this meadow, and I believe it's Morpheus Meadow because someone on Chad's channel described that what I was describing sounded like Morpheus Meadow, which is like a place where souls run around for all eternity. So I looked above me, and there was like those 3 portals. They were like now in the sky. They were huge, and they were glowing like a reddish colour, and they were kind of moving. They looked very bubbly, and they just moved. And I saw some others, like the other ones that were in the room next to the walls with me, fall out of those portals too. But I didn't see where they had landed. But we could hear each other, but we couldn't see each other. And I just remember running aimlessly on this dark meadow with like long grass, really long grass, and like the sky that it looked dark, and it looked like angry waves like in the sky. So I started running around on this field aimlessly, calling out to the others, not knowing where they were. All of a sudden, sometimes I could hear them, sometimes I couldn't. And all of a sudden, like, this man that called himself a spirit guide appeared, but he didn't come across as having good energy. And it was almost like he was tormenting me because telling me like I needed to give up, and I don't really remember like the conversation much on that. Eventually, it did start to rain, which was horrible. Like, I'd never felt like the rain like that before. It was cold. And because it started to rain, all of a sudden my legs started to fuse together and I could not run. It made it very difficult. So I was just lying on the grass for ages, crying. And then eventually when it had stopped and I was able to walk again, I did eventually find the others. You know, it felt like we had been there for an eternity. And when we found each other, we started to walk to where we knew where these other Mintakans were that had gone through the portals too. When the others appeared, like that's when the spirit guide, he turned up again, and he opened up like this door and he showed Earth, and he says, "You need to come here." And I told him to go away. He wasn't my spirit guide. I don't know if the girls that were with me saw him, as they didn't seem to react. So, and then he disappeared. So I walked like these rocks that were going down a slanted hill right down to the end where there was like a stream. There were some trees there, but they were burnt and badly damaged. And every single Mintakan was like sitting on these rocks. So we went down, and the queen, she was giving a speech. So even though we had been running on this meadow for an eternity, it was like no time for them had even passed. Because I don't know, time obviously there doesn't work the same as it does here. So we sat down and we listened to what the queen had to say, and then after she gave a speech, she was gonna like bring us back. So one at a time, we held her hand. She used her trident to like teleport us back to where we were meant to be. And then she said something to me about like how she should have forgiven me, because me and her, I believe, had issues with each other. I don't know but I'm not sure what those issues were like about. When we teleported back, we were like back under the tunnel again where we were originally before we got sucked through those black portals. And it was now daylight, and we could see light shining through the other end of the tunnel. But there was like tufts of dirt that was like blocking most of like the tunnel entrance, and we crawled out, and there was just rows and rows of like dirt all across, and the whole sea had been buried under dirt. And we knew that all the sea creatures there would have died. Like everything had just been destroyed, and it was so devastating. Sad because like I had memories from like childhood of like us swimming in the sea, playing with the dolphins, and we'd play this game where Mintaka had like this light that would shine off. There's a place called the Light Sea, and there'd be tons of light shining off the sea, and it would go all the way high up into the sky, and it would also be low down in the water. And this is quite a shallow area of water, and we'd play this game where we would like chase the light rays, and the one who managed to swim through the rays of light that randomly appeared, because they all randomly appeared in different places underneath the water, would like win, and we would see how many times, you know, who did it the most would be like the winner, and it was just for fun. And all those happy memories were like gone in an instant. And then just knowing that our sea creature friends and that were like buried under all these tufts of dirt, and we knew that most of Mintaka would have been like that, we felt hopeless. So we did this thing where we tried to call out to these other extraterrestrials. We all held hands and we started singing, and usually like the vibration of like our singing voice would like call out into the universe, and the other extraterrestrials would be able to hear us. Most of it was done telepathically, but we just sung to kind of help with that. And usually we would have really beautiful siren voices, but it just sounded so horrible and screechy, and we didn't know what had gone wrong and why our voices sounded like that. And I had an idea that, because I knew that I didn't live that far away, that we should go, like me and like my stepdad and aunt, that which were now with me because they had caught up to where I was, that we should go to the shell house. And I suggested going there because I knew that we had a technology that could call out to other extraterrestrials, and my stepdad and aunt really advised against it, but I went off anyway because it was the only hope that I had, and I wasn't going to give up. So we ran back to the shell house, climbed in. Luckily it hadn't been destroyed by the bombs or anything. There's only just like tufts and dirt stuff around it, and like on the wall near like the staircase there was like, I don't know how to explain how it looked. It was just like this wooden case thing, this wooden like coral shaped like door that you could open up on both sides. I mean, it was kind of like a cabinet, I guess you could explain, but it has like a type of technology where you could like click on like a certain planet and star and like touch it, and then if you could send your conscious thoughts out into the universe by just touching like this planet or star on this like hologram kind of technology, and it would like send a message to that planet that has extraterrestrial life on it like you. So I did that and called out, but for some reason I couldn't connect to the other alien races. It's like the reptilians did something, so we weren't able to call out for help. But there was only one that I could contact, and it was like an extraterrestrial race that was like enslaved, and I believe it was like the Hardarian race. And when I called out to like one of these Hardarians, I think, but don't quote me on this, I really don't know if it definitely was a Hardarian. I just know that this was like an alien race that had been enslaved. And I spoke to one of the enslaved people, and she said that she had to get permission first to be able to speak to me. And but like, had I tried to speak to any other extraterrestrial races, and I said that I tried, but the reptilians had blocked her signal. The evil extraterrestrial that was enslaving her did not like that I was trying to contact her, her enslaved, for like help. So she sent a very angry signal, and it destroyed like the technology that I was using to be able to call for help. And I didn't know what to do. The wires and everything were broken and damaged. And because this technology was like gifted to us, this wasn't like our own. We didn't know how to fix it, and my stepdad was trying to figure out what to do with the wires. I mean, my dad, not my stepdad. Trying to figure out what to do with like the wires and like put it all together. But like, no matter what we did, nothing was working. Then all of a sudden, behind us, like some rocks or something fell, and it blocked the entrance like out. It blocked like the exit out of like the shell building. So now me and my dad and aunt were now trapped in this shell house with no way out. They had like followed me not long after how I'd run off, so that's how they ended up in the building with me. And we were in there all the way up until nightfall, and we could still hear like bombs going off, and I was like terrified, and because if the bomb had landed on the house, we'd be killed, and we couldn't run away or escape or anything. And my dad, he was like trying to comfort me, and he was just saying, like, you know, don't worry, they're far away, they're nowhere near us, they're not going to get us. And we had like this weird way of hugging where we would like hold under, like we would hold like the elbow like underneath, like, I don't know how to explain, like hold each other's arms in a certain way and like lean in to the chest like for a hug instead of like hugging like how us humans do. But we didn't really hug each other, like we didn't need to show affection to one another because we were able to feel each other's love. So like we didn't really hug in like the traditional sense. And I was like, well, what are we gonna do? We can't sit in here. And they said that there's no way out. And part of me felt bad because I felt like if I hadn't run into the house, they wouldn't be stuck in here with me. Also, there's like this high dimensional being that we were only able to see her in dreams, but she would contact us like in our dimension by making this kind of like twinkling, high pitched kind of sound. And she was making this sound to try and comfort us, to let us know that she's here. So before like the war even happened, very often she'd be like a teacher or like a mentor to us, and when she ever wanted to contact us, she would make this twinkling sound and we would run up the stairs into the shell beds, fall asleep. And we would be able to see her in dreams, and she would play games and like interact with us, and it was all about teaching us about empathy. And one of them was, I was in it kind of looked like the upstairs shell room that we all slept in. So on the upstairs bit of the room, it was like a staircase that led up, and there was just 3 beds in a row, and we all slept on this first floor together. And it kind of looked like the upstairs of the shell house that we lived in. But there was like, it's like the walls were like made out of some kind of like light brownish bricks, instead of like shell concrete, and there would be like the same pattern on like the roof as there was on our shell house that had like, you know, images of like stars and stuff like that on it. But there would be like this blue energy, and I was like standing in mid-air on this blue energy, and it was fun to jump on. And then I fell onto the ground, and she was like, oh, don't worry, I'll help you back up. And then she helped me back up onto it, and she goes, oh, now it's your turn. And so she fell onto the ground, and then she made me help. She said, come on, help me up. So I did the same, and I struggled to reach her at first. And then when I pulled her up, she was like, oh, well done, Aya. And she gave me like this massive hug. And then for the rest of the night, for fun, I was just jumping on this energy. And she did this weird thing where she like fused herself to like the wall, and she would lose her legs, and like, but she also, I got the impression that behind the wall was also my dad, and then behind his wall and in his dream, she was on the other side. So she was all in our dream interacting with us all at the same time, even though we were all in separate dreams, and I wasn't in the same dream as like my dad and aunt. So she was able to split her energy off so she could interact with us all individually. So that was like the role that she played with us, and even she was trying to comfort us by making this twinkling noise. I'm gonna like cut the video off here and like make a part 2. I'm probably gonna have to do this in many parts because it's just gonna be like too long for like my phone memory and like trying to save it all to just do it all in one go. So I'm gonna stop here and then make a part 2 later.